Hello, I'm Reverend Nick Bullitt, the Engagement Catalyst here at OneSpirit, and I'm sitting here today with Reverend DeShannon Barnes-Bowens.
Hi, Nick.
Hi! You are the co-director of seminary here at OneSpirit. How are you? So good to see you.
Good to see you too.
Thank you. If you can just start by introducing yourself and sharing a little bit about the work that you do currently, as well as the work that you do here at OneSpirit.
Absolutely. So as you said, I am the co-director of the seminary program, and this actually is my first year as co-director. I've been in relationship with OneSpirit since I was a student 11 years ago, and I guess it was just so much love and transformation that I couldn't leave. Outside of OneSpirit, before I even came here, I had an organization, a consultant organization called ELERA Counseling and Education Services. So what I do through ELERA is I focus on sexuality and sexual abuse, and specifically educating people about how prevalent sexual abuse is and ways to prevent sexual abuse. How I started looking at sexuality was I realized that I couldn't effectively talk about sexual abuse or even support people in healing from sexual abuse without looking at sexuality. So that's a lot of what my work through my consultant organization started focusing on. And then after a while of doing that work, I wanted to focus on wellness. So I decided to start looking at wellness and vicarious trauma as well.
Interesting. So how did you first get started into thinking about creating your work, your life's work around trauma and sexual abuse and sexuality?
It actually started from reading a book. I don't know if you're familiar with Push by Sapphire.
Yes.
So when that book came out, it was on my roommate's bookshelf back in St. Louis, where I'm originally from. And I said, this is interesting. And so I read that book, and even though it was a work of fiction, it really moved me. It moved me in a deep way. I remember crying as I was reading the story. And it was one of those things that as I read it, even though it seemed unbelievable for me at the time, the things that was happening to the main character.
Can you just share a couple of things that happened to the main character?
Oh, thank you for the question. So she was abused by her parents. The main character of the book was abused by her parents, and because they were her parents, and sexually abused too. It was hard for me to believe at that time that both parents would enact that type of abuse on their own child. And so when I read that, it just sparked this natural question for me, is this what happens in families? And that's when I decided that I wanted to focus on that work, because at that time I was working at a mental health research institute in St. Louis. I was thinking about graduate school. So in my mind, I was like, well, what am I going to focus on? You know, what's going to be my work to really get into? And then it turned out to be that.
And you have a workshop coming up that's called In the Age of Me Too. And so what are you bringing to that workshop? What are you specifically bringing with your personality to the workshop?
Well, hopefully with my personality, what I'm bringing is a place or an invitation where people can feel like they can be brave enough to explore this topic, because the hashtag of Me Too has sometimes become contentious with people because people are not sure what they should say, what's safe, what's not safe. How do I know the appropriate thing to say to someone who's been a survivor? And the reason I was inspired to name the full workshop Sexuality, it was perspectives on sexuality, sexual abuse, and healing in the age of Me Too. And I'm actually focusing on 3 particular religious spiritual traditions, one being Christianity, one being Native American spirituality, and then the other tradition being Ifa, since that's a tradition I'm initiated into. And I wanted to focus on that because I had read something that Tarana Burke, who was the person who started that movement of Me Too, and I read that she was basically saying that now is the time for more people to step up and to be accountable in this age of Me Too. And the actual quote, I believe I quoted her in the description. I'm not recalling it at this time. But there's a lot of things that spiritual communities want to do, or people who are involved in spiritual communities. And I've always said that looking at religion and how religion impacts sexuality with religion's views, with religion's doctrines, it intersects with how people are able to respond to sexual abuse, prevention as well as healing. A lot of news cycles are focused on the abuse that happens, and there are religious leaders who do horrific things in terms of sexually abusing people in their care, but at the same time, there are also communities who do wonderful things to support healing, and there are actually principles and teachings in specific religions that can actually look at sexuality in a positive light and support people in healing from sexual abuse.
So DeShannon, who should be taking this workshop? Who is this workshop for?
This workshop is for everybody. And that can sound like a kind of generic cliche answer, but when you think of the fact that in this society that we have 1 in 4 girls who are and women who are sexually abused and 1 in 6 men and boys, this is an issue that affects everyone. So you don't, even though we're focusing on religion and spirituality, you don't even have to be a religious person or a person who has a particular spiritual belief, because sexual abuse affects everyone. So this is for anybody who wants to come and learn more about how these traditions that I am focusing on look at sexuality and look at abuse, and really look at ways of prevention, because everyone knows someone that this has happened to. And regardless of a person's individual religious or spiritual belief, everyone knows someone who is spiritual or religious. So just being able to have that level of awareness and being able to respond to a friend or point them in the right direction, and raising your own awareness for this issue that may affect someone in your family, a close friend that you know, then you'll be all the better for it and more informed and be able to engage in this conversation in a much healthier and grounded way.
Beautiful. Great. Well, we are looking forward to this workshop. I know that it's going to be very powerful and has the opportunity to be very healing as well.
Thank you. I think so too.
Yes.